This jet stream is going to mean active weather is coming, and that starts tomorrow into our Tuesday with this winter storm, then another one into Wednesday and Thursday. This video has the latest breakdowns for those two winter systems, plus all the active weather and temperature trends ahead. This video has all the latest updates in this tale of the terrain of winter storms that's been dominating here as we've started February and is expected to continue. Make sure you're using timestamps down below in the description of this video if you want to skip ahead to a specific part, but we're starting off with the first winter storm that is in the future realm here, and that's as we go overnight tonight out of our Monday, February 10th and into our Tuesday, February 11th of 2025. The origin zone for a lot of our winter weather is out west. We've seen some energy move out of there and into the Midwestern U.S. today, which is what that bright blue is indicating up there into some parts of the north central plains into the Midwest. The main snow event out of this winter system for especially our Tuesday and Tuesday night, though, is going to come from parts of Missouri, and then we're going to see that snow pick up to a more moderate rate over into parts of the mid-Atlantic. There could be some ice between some of that snow in a thin corridor between it and the rainfall and storms that will be down to the south. Some of those storms could be on the stronger side, especially increasing the flooding risk into some parts of the mid-south and lower Mississippi Valley. Before we do get into the timing of this first winter system that is now only about 24 hours away for a lot of the peak impacts, we're going to be looking here at that specific snow tracks graphic more zoomed in so that you can see the areas expecting light and moderate snow out of this system as well as ice. You can see they're coming out of northern Arkansas and then up into Missouri. That's where we transition out of some ice to some light snow that will likely pick up as we go through the night tonight and into our Tuesday morning. Better chance for, again, that more moderate snow into parts of northeast Kentucky, southern Ohio, through a lot of West Virginia, northern Virginia, and then over there into the Delmarva region and into New Jersey, where we could pick up some spots getting upwards of 3 to 6 inches of snow on that higher end. Ice could extend as far back down to the south as the western North Carolina mountains. With that being said, though, let's go ahead and jump into some timing so that you can see when you'll be impacted by some of this winter or just regular rainy weather, depending on where you are, and how the system's going to hit you as we go into our Tuesday. Let's go ahead and play things out with the latest simulation, at least, of what's going to happen with the HRRR model, and you can see things really look to pick up midnight and after for a lot of zones with anything from rain into parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas and Tennessee, transitioning up to that ice and especially that little thin band of snow that's likely as early as overnight tonight and into the pre-dawn hours of our Tuesday from parts of far southeastern Missouri into far southern Illinois, right around the west central parts of Kentucky through central parts of the state and then over there to the east central zones. That could include places like Madisonville, Elizabethtown, over to Richmond there in Kentucky, and maybe even southwest Virginia and southwest West Virginia getting some snow as early as 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning on our Tuesday. Things are going to pick up in all regions, though, whether it's with that rainfall that could eventually induce that flooding threat from northeast Texas all the way up into Tennessee and points in between through around mid-morning Tuesday, or with that snowfall, which is looking like it will become much heavier by this point in time. A lot of northern and central parts of Kentucky likely picking up some more moderate snowfall rates by the time we get towards this point in time, into southwest West Virginia as well as western Virginia, watching more of that moderate snowfall filling in, especially as we get through the late morning hours, it looks like, in some of those zones, while we could even see some freezing rain on the south side of that. Into the mid-Atlantic, that's when it's going to be into the afternoon and evening when we start to see our snowfall fill in. Richmond points north up there towards Baltimore and Washington, D.C. If you're not getting snow by 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, expect it to pick up and become, again, more moderate, maybe even briefly heavy in some of these zones where we could get more of those higher-end accumulations. That will continue, but briefly move through before heading offshore into the overnight hours of our Tuesday night, heading into Wednesday there, where even places like New York City and Philly could briefly get touched by snow. And then notice back down towards the southwest, continuing to watch storms moving over the same areas, especially through parts of Arkansas into Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and this is what's going to raise your flood threat out of this particular system. That being said, though, this system is probably going to be all said and done by the time we get overnight and into the early morning hours of Wednesday, or at least most of its main impacts, other than that lingering front it will leave behind. And then we're on to talking about this next one, which will already be starting to bring snow to the central plain. In terms of the final snow and ice forecast that I'm going to be showing you here from the National Digital Forecast Database for this first winter storm of the video, here's that snowfall first things first by the time we get out of our Tuesday and then through the early part of our Wednesday. Notice we see some snow coming out of parts of Missouri and southern Illinois, but that's going to be pretty negligible, just a dusting to an inch in many spots. It's once we get here into parts of northern Kentucky, far southern Ohio, and into West Virginia, this stripe right here, especially as you get towards the center part of these areas that I have circled, better chance for more uninterrupted snow with less of a transition to ice or rain, and many spots here will pick up upwards of 3 to 5 inches of snowfall, maybe in some spots getting more like 6 to 8 there in extreme northeastern Kentucky or back into parts of West Virginia. Then as we stretch over into parts of the mid-Atlantic, more spots through especially eastern West Virginia, northern and central parts of Virginia, and then over into the Delmarva region, picking up upwards of 4 to 6 inches of snowfall. That's going to be indicated by those deeper blues into those purples. And then as you can see, a little bit less as you get on up here towards New Jersey and far southern Long Island, but still a couple of inches, maybe even upwards of 3 to 4 in some spots as you go up there into some of those zones, as well as onto the south side of Philadelphia. In terms of your freezing rain, this is that rainfall where you've got a warm layer in the atmosphere, but down at the surface, temperatures are freezing, and whatever hits the ground or power lines or trees is going to freeze on that contact. Some significant ice here into parts of Virginia, West Virginia, and then back into North Carolina especially. So be on the lookout, mostly in these zones in particular, for that most dangerous freezing rain that we're going to get out of this first winter system. In addition to the freezing rain and the snowfall, here's a look at that rainfall forecast just through Tuesday and the early part of Wednesday. We're down here over parts of the Mid-South and up towards the Ohio Valley and the Tennessee Valley. That's where we're going to have that most significant swath where you can see here from Texas all the way up to Kentucky, points in between. 1 to 3 inches of rain looking to be a pretty common theme, with possibly even some locally higher amounts just in those heaviest thunderstorms through basically a 24-hour span. This is why if you get a flood alert issued in your area, which you can check for those on weather.gov or by having notifications from a weather app, you need to be making sure that you're trying to avoid those trouble spot roadways or just staying off roadways in general if it turns into a more dangerous situation. After that first winter storm, we're going to move on into this next one, which is literally going to kick off overnight Tuesday night into Wednesday and continue through some parts of Thursday, February 13th, and into the very early parts of Friday, February 14th in its far northeastern extent. As you can see here, this is going to be a much more large-scale winter storm with its origin zone, particularly coming out of parts of the Mountain West there and the Rockies. And then eventually we're going to see some of our snow coming through parts of Nebraska, Kansas, all the way up through the Midwest, Great Lakes, and then into the interior Northeast. There could be more of an ice problem over a larger scale area as we get through Wednesday heading into our Thursday. And then back down on the south side of this storm, lots of spots into the Ohio Valley, back down to the lower Mississippi Valley and into the southeast, dealing with not only rain, but the elevated risk for flooding. And we could even see some significant severe storms in those areas where I've got the red shaded colors, particularly in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Now that we've timed out one winter storm, let's time out another. It would be my honor to do that for you right here with the latest future radar from the NAM model, starting as we go overnight Tuesday night and into our early Wednesday morning, where snow is likely going to be breaking out already from parts of Denver, Colorado, over to Wichita and Topeka in Kansas, Lincoln, Nebraska, Des Moines, Iowa, points in between. It's just going to pick up as we go overnight and into our Wednesday morning, where that shield of snow will expand into points east. It looks like this general zone where you've kind of got the cross sections of Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and Missouri, that's where we're going to pick up that best chance for heavier snowfall accumulations, or at least moderate ones, as we get into the Wednesday morning time frame. Meanwhile, back down to the south of that as you get towards Tulsa, Oklahoma City, then over to Little Rock, and then parts of eastern Texas and parts of Louisiana, starting to see a lot more warm, moist air being pulled up, elevating flood threats over some of the same zones that saw them Tuesday and Tuesday night. And we'll also have to watch some of the storms that we get down here on the southern end of the system, which will ramp up possibly back down into parts of Louisiana and Mississippi into our Wednesday afternoon. Let's go back on up here and talk about the ice and snow, though. St. Louis, Missouri, up into parts of Effingham there in Illinois. This could be where we see some ice, or somewhere in that general vicinity where we've got the crosshairs between rain turning to freezing rain to snow into our Wednesday afternoon. Meanwhile, it looks to be all snow in Kansas City, Missouri, up to Quincy there on the border of Missouri and Illinois, and then up to Chicago, Madison, Milwaukee. Pretty decent snowfall falling throughout the afternoon and just continuing to pick up into the evening as the system will dump snow for hours in a lot of these zones on the southern parts of Lake Michigan. I think things will be a little bit more problematic as you come into some parts of northern Indiana, stretching into northern Ohio, maybe even pushing at least towards some sleet or briefly freezing rain in a place like Detroit, Michigan out of this system if that ice line continues to trend north. Something we'll be watching, maybe even in a place like Lansing, Michigan, but places north of you all the way up to Saginaw, Traverse City there, looking like all snow as we go through the evening here in, again, the parts of the northern glove of Michigan. And as we stretch over here, we're going to be seeing a warm front push north on the east side of this particular winter storm. So even if you start as snow, we're going to start to see freezing rain turning to rain quickly as you move on up into parts of the mid-Atlantic as we go overnight Wednesday night and into our Thursday. Let's zoom things out so you can see big picture what's going to be going on. There's your snow. There's your ice, and then back down here we'll be watching your flooding and severe weather. A pretty dynamic storm system overall, and the only area that will kind of get jumped a little bit is going to be there right along the Ohio River corridor, where it's looking like we're just going to see generally more scattered showers, not as much of the heavy rainfall. Let's just go on over here into the northeast, though, where things are going to continue to pick up as we get into the morning hours of our Thursday. Snow could start out in a place like Boston, but look at how it turns to ice, and then even eventually rain, even up into Maine as we go through the day Thursday. It's going to be a very flirtatious line between rain, ice, and snowfall, so it's going to be kind of dicey even as far north as the far northern parts of Maine with this particular system, and Bangor almost certainly going to turn over from something fluffy to something wet by the time we get to the very end of this event. And then we're going to be done with that one and moving on to our next event as we get towards the very end of the week into the weekend. With that timing overview in mind, let's go ahead and jump ahead here with the National Digital Forecast Database, looking at the current projected forecast snowfall for the system. There's still time for things to shift a little bit for some zones, but overall, this is the nice, moderate swath of snow that I've been showing you that we're talking about here for this system. With any of these zones in the blues, from eastern Colorado to central Nebraska to north central parts of Iowa to south central Wisconsin, and then through this zone in central and south central Kansas, parts of central Missouri, give or take, and then over into central Illinois, depending on where we get that ice line. Most of these zones in the blues expected to pick up around 3 to 6 inches of snowfall, maybe a little more, maybe a little bit less by the time we get, especially through the day Wednesday and into early Thursday. This swath right here where you see the purples along the Nebraska-Kansas border, the Missouri-Iowa border, and then on up there through Chicago and Milwaukee. From parts of northern Illinois into southern Wisconsin, looking like that best chance swath as of now for many more spots to pick up closer to 6 to 10 inches of snow. Wouldn't expect a foot in many spots, although that couldn't be ruled out in an isolated instance here or there. What about into places like Michigan as you push into the Great Lakes region? Notice Michigan going to be mainly the spot where we get in that Great Lakes zone, that heavier snowfall. It's not going to be northern Indiana really, maybe a couple inches in some spots in the far northern parts of the state. Looking more like central Michigan is going to be your bullseye zone, where spots here are going to pick up upwards of around 6 to 8 inches of snow, maybe getting closer to 10 inches in some isolated instances. Then last but not least, your snow on over here into the northeast. Of course, ignore that down there towards the mid-Atlantic. That's from that first system that I talked about. Here comes your snow into the interior northeast by the time we get through Thursday evening. Most spots picking up only a few inches of snow if you find yourself in those blues. The purples indicating more like closer to 3 to 6 plus inches of snowfall, and that will be back there into parts of northern New York and then up there into parts of northern Maine, where we'll have a little bit more uninterrupted snowfall or just wrap around with some snowfall towards the tail end of this event. Most other areas, keep in mind, will transition over to ice. Speaking of that ice, here's a look at the current forecast for that with the National Digital Forecast Database. Keep in mind that some of this that you see in North Carolina and Virginia, in fact, a good bit of it will be from that first storm Tuesday into early Wednesday. These other zones that you see filmed with the pinks will not be, though, and you can see in some patchy areas coming out of northern Oklahoma, into parts of the Ozarks there, out of northern Arkansas into Missouri, through a swath there that's likely going to go somewhere through central Illinois and then into northern Indiana. Along that Michigan, Indiana, or Michigan-Ohio border, we'll get some ice, and then on over here into at least the southern half of the northeastern United States, looking like many zones in those lighter pinks, picking up at least a glaze to 1/10 of an inch of ice. Not going to cause many power outages if you get that kind of ice, which is going to be the expectation for most zones. But it will cause those slick spots on roadways that are going to make bridges dangerous to drive on, and in some isolated instances, more than 1/10 of an inch will be possible, and that could even lead to some isolated power outages. So be on the lookout for that ice and try to stay off roadways late Wednesday heading into Thursday in these zones as this winter storm moves through. I'm sure I'll provide one more final brief on the severe weather side of this storm in a quick future update into our Tuesday. But again, as we go into Wednesday down over parts of the Mid-South, watching more flooding, watching more severe weather, and keep in mind that flood threat could extend as far east as Virginia and the Carolinas as we go through Wednesday and Wednesday night. Once we get beyond this winter system, look at the next one. We're going to see big energy moving through parts of the west as we get through Thursday and into Friday, coming out of parts of California, Oregon, and then extending into the Mountain West eventually. Valley rain, mountain snow as usual in a place like California, and then snow here through a lot of the Rockies and Mountain West. When you get that kind of energy moving through the west and it looks that bullish, you're going to have a bullish storm as you move into areas further east, and it looks like we're going to have low pressure forming somewhere around the mid or lower Mississippi Valley as we get through Saturday heading into Sunday. Probably going to be an area of snow on its northern end, an area of possibly the most significant severe weather of any of these most recent winter storms, maybe even some flooding down here on its southern end. This is going to be a big winter storm with gusty winds for a lot of zones, and it could even lead to a blizzard for some folks in the winter weather side of this storm. I definitely don't want to use any of these words lightly because this could be a very significant storm, and I just want to let you know that I'll be keeping you updated on that one because it's not too far out. Many more updates to come as we get through the rest of this week and towards the weekend on that one, and then it does look like things quiet down based on this ensemble guidance as we go into the following week. That leaves me with only the next couple days of temperatures to briefly talk about here. Let's get right into it with the National Digital Forecast Database. High temperature projections as we get into our Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the trends beyond that. As we get into our Tuesday, looking at 60s and 70s right down here, hugging the Mexico border, and then down into the Gulf Coast of the United States. As you get quickly north from there, we've got a lot more of this cooler air, of course, due to the winter storm that's going to keep a lot of these zones in the 30s, as we're going to be seeing snowfall, keeping temperatures closer to freezing, even for the max temperatures of the day, into a lot of the Ohio Valley over into the Mid-Atlantic Tuesday. Back into the far northwest U.S., northwest to southeast flow that's going to help in eventually supporting these winter storms. Temperatures only getting 0 to 15 as a result of that, anywhere from Idaho all the way over to Wisconsin, and most of the northeast U.S. as well, staying below freezing for forecast highs Tuesday. What about Wednesday? We see a little bit more warmth lifting north here in the mid-south, and that's going to help in eventually supporting that severe weather threat with 70s into places like Louisiana and Mississippi into Wednesday afternoon. You get that high contrast, though, right along this line, and points south to points north. You go from like 50 in Arkansas to 25 as you get towards northern Missouri. Not too far in terms of mileage, but a big difference in terms of those temperatures, and that's why your snowfall is going to be falling in a big way right here, where it's not too cold, but you got plenty of 20s, and you got moisture moving up into those, and that is exactly what's going to happen there, as well as into the interior northeast Wednesday into Thursday. Further down the line, look at what could happen in terms of contrast with that weekend winter storm. Looks like we're going to see more deep cold pushing into an area that's going to be warm by Saturday into Sunday, and that's why I'm also concerned about that next one. Again, lots to keep you updated on, and make sure you're subscribing down below so you don't miss any future updates.
One Nation Web.